at the Waypoint Research Institute and Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. I'd like to welcome you all to our series. This is the Waypoint Talks, Maintaining Our Momentum. It's something that we've created in place of our annual conference, which we obviously couldn't hold because of COVID-19 reasons this year. And so we're hoping that we can address some of the really important topics that our conference would have covered. So today I'd like to introduce you very briefly to my co-hosts. So Jessica Caston, who is the Executive Assistant to the Vice President, Research and Academics at the Waypoint Research Institute and Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. She is masquerading on this call as Waypoint Research Institute. You will see her and I responding to you in the chat and the Q&A sections. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Rob Meter, who is the Medical Director of Family, Child, and Youth Mental Health at Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. And he will later be introducing Dr. Ross Greene, who we are very excited to have with us today. But before we get started, I'd like to just do a few housekeeping notes. So we are recording this session. If you are uncomfortable with being named in the participants list, we encourage you to please change your name to make it a little bit more anonymous. Also, because we are recording this session, all participants are muted. So we would like to encourage you to use the chat section for any comments, random chatter that you would like to share throughout the presentation. However, if you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature. This is really important because this is where we are actually going to be monitoring for questions. We will not be monitoring the chat section for questions. The Q&A section has a really cool feature where you can upvote any questions that you really like and you would like to see answered. When you upvote a question, it moves it to the top of the list. So that means that it's more likely to get answered when we have time to do questions. So on that note, when you put a question into Q&A, please make sure that you read what's there already, just to make sure that we're not duplicating questions. And if there's something that's similar to something you wanted to ask, just upvote that one, and we'll know that that's something that people really want to have answered. So we'd also like to share that we will be sending out an email to all participants afterwards with an attendance certificate, as well as a participant survey link. And we will also share the information for where the recording and any other materials will be housed for you so that you can watch them at a later date. We'd also like to encourage you to sign up for our next session, which will be on April 19th, and we will be talking about the effects of COVID-19 on healthcare professionals in our region. It's going to be a really exciting talk hosted by some members of our research team here at Waypoint, as well as members at Georgian College. So we're really excited about that one. Anyway, so yes, now I will, one last housekeeping item. If you are a family physician or you are a healthcare practitioner who works at a family physician office, we do have a workshop that is dedicated specifically to your needs being hosted at 12 o'clock today. The registration for that is still open. We will pop that information into the chat for you. And so we encourage you to sign up for that. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Rob Meter to introduce Ross Greene.
Hi, Laura, and thank you so much to WRI, Waypoint Research Institute, for hosting this event today. And it is my pleasure to join this and to introduce Dr. Greene today. So Dr. Greene, Dr. Ross Greene, is a clinical psychologist and founder and the director of the nonprofit organization Lives in the Balance. He is best known as the originator of the collaborative and proactive solutions approach. For over 20 years, he served on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and is currently on the adjunct faculty in the psychology department of Virginia Tech and in the faculty of science at University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. He lectures extensively around the world, and he is probably best known as a New York Times bestselling author for the books The Explosive Child, Praising Human Beings, and Lost at School, many books which I often recommend to my patients and families. I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Greene on my podcast in January of 2020, and we discussed things like the wildfires in Australia and problems in schools, et cetera, and how the world could solve problems better collaboratively. I'm not sure if he remembers that interview, but little did we know what lay ahead in 2020. Because since then, we've witnessed a global pandemic, economic and political unrest, racial tensions escalate, and really many of our cultural institutions shaken. And if we ever need an approach to solving problems in an effective way, it's now. So on that note, it is with pleasure that I welcome Dr. Greene to Waypoint today. Dr. Ross Greene, thank you for coming and speaking with us today. We look forward to hearing from you.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I want to let Laura know that if we want people to see my face, I'm getting the message that I'm unable to start my video because the host has stopped it. So I'm happy to have people not see my face, but if we want people to see my face, we'll have to do something about that. But I'm very glad that even in this difficult time, known as a pandemic, we're able to get together like this. Thank you, technology. But especially thank you to Rob, Dr. Meader, for facilitating this and making it possible. What we're going to be doing here for a little bit anyways, before we get to questions, which I want to leave at least 10 minutes for, is still can't get my video started. So I'm going to stop trying soon just so that I don't get distracted by it. We're going to be talking about a different approach to understanding and helping kids who exhibit concerning behaviors. Now, if you know my work already, then you know that I am not too picky, there we go, about which concerning behaviors we're talking about. Behaviors in this model all communicate the same thing. And so we'll get to that soon. So what's interesting is while what a lot of people are concerned about, at least on the surface, is the kids' concerning behaviors. The kids' concerning behaviors are actually not going to be a major focal point as we are trying to help that kid. And that is a very different perspective on things. It will all make a great deal of sense as we go on. But here's another interesting thing. If the kids' behaviors are not going to be our major focal point, then the kids' diagnosis, which is basically a rough summary of the kids' concerning behaviors, are not going to be a major focal point either. So there are some indications of things to come here, but what I'm going to start with in this overview of the collaborative and proactive solutions model are the 5 big shifts or 5 key themes that accompany the model. And these are the things that I really want you to remember the most from everything I'm saying. We're not going to be spending an enormous amount of time, just because time is limited, on the actual strategies of the model and what you're doing to bring these 5 big shifts and key themes to life. We'll be going through them to some degree. I could spend 2 days talking about all of that and still not cover it. We're going to cover the really important stuff here in this hour that we have together. Here's the first really big shift key theme, and I've already alluded to it to some degree. Many of us, me included, were trained to primarily focus on a kid's concerning behaviors. And we were trained to try to modify those behaviors. And that's not what you're doing in this model. In this model, you are instead focused on the problems that are causing those behaviors and solving them. That's a big shift. This is a problem-solving model, not a behavior modification model. And why is that a big deal? Because of what a lot of caregivers spend a lot of time doing in response to concerning behaviors. We try to modify them. Now, some caregivers get a little bit concerned. They when they hear that we're not going to be modifying behavior, they begin to wonder, yes, but then how is the kid's behavior going to improve? What the research tells us, and there's a fair amount of it at this point, is that when you are busy solving problems in the ways that you're about to hear described, the kids' behaviors improve every bit as much as they would have if all we were busy doing was modifying those behaviors. The problem is that the reverse is not true. If all we're busy doing is modifying the kid's behavior, the problems remain unsolved. In this model, concerning behavior is simply the signal, just the fever, just the means by which the kid is communicating something very important. I'm stuck. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. That's all behavior is, the signal, the fever. If all we're busy doing is modifying behavior, then all we're busy doing is modifying the signal. But we're not solving any problems that way. So as you've already heard, I'm also not a very diagnostically oriented mental health professional. I don't really think diagnoses give us the information we most badly need to understand and help this kid as well as we can, or their caregivers. These days, I don't rely on diagnoses at all. These days, if you asked me to categorize kids' concerning behaviors, diagnoses wouldn't be where I'd head. It would be, I would basically categorize those concerning behaviors into one or both of two categories, lucky and unlucky. What are lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? Well, we could start with the holy grail of lucky, using your words, especially if it's the right words, but also whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations lucky? Those ways aren't going to get you popped into timeout, not going to get you held in from recess, not going to get you held after school, not going to get you detention, suspension, expulsion, not going to get you restrained, as in being pinned to the ground by 2 to 4 big adults, not going to get you secluded as being thrown into a locked or blocked padded room. But best of all, those lucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are highly likely to elicit empathy from your caregivers. Lucky you, kid. But that's not the kind of kid I've been working with for the last 40 plus years. I've been working with the unlucky variety. What are unlucky ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations? You already know, but here's a sampling: screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. There's worse. Why are those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations unlucky? Well, those ways at the mild end are likely to get you popped into timeout, deprived of recess, held after school, detention, now we're getting more serious, suspension, expulsion, restraint, seclusion, but worst of all, those ways of communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations are far less likely to elicit empathy from your caregivers, even though the field of developmental psychopathology has been telling us for a very long time that whether you're communicating that you're having difficulty meeting certain expectations in ways that are lucky or unlucky, your concerning behaviors are communicating the exact same thing. I'm stuck. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. That's why I frequently say that in the CPS model, a signal is a signal is a signal. We don't spend any time in the CPS model differentiating among signals. We fully appreciate that there are some signals that are more dangerous and more alarming and more unsafe than others. But as it relates to what behavior is telling us, concerning behaviors are all telling us, I'm stuck. There are expectations I'm having difficulty meeting. What we call those unmet expectations in this model is unsolved problems. By the way, also known as problems that have yet to be solved. Also known as problems that are waiting to be solved. Why have we been focused on behavior, overt behavior, for so long? Because a very long time ago, B.F. Skinner told us that overt behavior is the only thing that's observable, objective, and quantifiable. And B.F. Skinner did say that, but we often forget that B.F. Skinner also talked every bit as much about the conditions in which those behaviors occur. Conditions which are just as observable, just as objective, just as quantifiable. In this model, you are focused on those conditions. You are not focused on the behaviors that are occurring in those conditions. And now you know what we call those conditions in this model is either unmet expectations or preferably unsolved problems. Why do we prefer the term unsolved problems? Because it makes crystal clear the role of caregivers in the life of this kid. If this kid has problems that are still unsolved, what's our role? Help the kid solve them. Now, as you would imagine, this big shift away from behavior and on to the problems that are causing those behaviors, that's going to require different assessment instrumentation, because especially if you work in a school, you know what but also everywhere else, what primarily gets assessed when we are dealing with a kid with concerning behaviors are the concerning behaviors. We do behavior checklists, we do behavior observations. In some places, we do a functional behavior assessment, all so that we can come up with what's known as a behavior plan, all focused on the signal. The assessment tool that you'll be introduced to very soon that we use in this model is called the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. And I always say what the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems helps us figure out is the information that's been missing. That's big shift number one. That's a big one. Here's another big one. Now that we are solving problems with kids, we need to think about what kind of problem solvers we want to be. We adults tend to be real keen on problem solving of the unilateral kind. That's where the adult decides what the solution is and imposes it on the kid. It's also not what you're doing in this model. In this model, we operate on a very important assumption. You want to solve a problem with a kid? You're going to need a teammate. You're going to need a partner. Who's your partner? The kid. And by the way, generally speaking, that kid is going to be delighted to help you out. That kid has been wondering for a very long time, how come we adults keep trying to make things better? Without the kid's input, without the kid's involvement, without the kid's ideas, without the kid's sign off, this is problem solving of the collaborative kind. It's something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. And that partially explains why the CPS model is viewed as being trauma informed. The last thing you'd want to do with a human being with a trauma history is use power to try to do anything. No. You want to do collaboration with someone who has a trauma history. You want them to have voice. You want them to have agency. You want them to be a full participant in solving the problems that are affecting their lives. There's another reason that this model is often viewed as trauma-informed. By the way, what many people say about the CPS model is that it is the what you do part of trauma-informed care. I think trauma-informed care has done a marvelous job of helping us understand the brain basis of why so many kids respond in an over-the-top manner to problems and frustrations. I think it has done a marvelous job of helping us be more empathic toward many of those kids. But a lot of people say that that's not enough. You still need to know what to do. And a lot of people think that CPS is what you do next. But another very big part of why the CPS model is viewed as trauma-informed is because of big shift number 3. As you all know, a lot of the intervention that occurs for kids with concerning behaviors occur in the heat of the moment, reactively, emergently, not in this model. 99.9% of what you're doing in this model is planned, proactive. If you have a human being with a trauma history, you don't want to find yourself and you don't want to find them in the heat of the moment. You want to be almost exclusively proactive. But the minute we start talking about being proactive, some questions come up, like how can we be planned and proactive when we never know when the kid's going to get upset? When the kid's always getting upset from out of the blue, when the kid is so unpredictable. Here are the answers. Well, the kid is not unpredictable. The kid is not blowing up from out of the blue. You know exactly when that kid is going to get upset if you answer 2 questions right up front. The very 2 questions that are answered by the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. Those 2 questions are why and when, as in, why do some kids exhibit concerning behaviors? Why is this kid exhibiting concerning behaviors? When do kids exhibit concerning behaviors? When is this kid exhibiting concerning behaviors? Well, here's the answer to question number 1. And by the way, the answer to question number 1, why, has been provided to us by the research that has accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years on kids with concerning behaviors. And that 40 to 50 years of research can be summarized in 1 sentence. Why do some kids exhibit concerning behaviors? Because they're lacking the skills to not exhibit concerning behaviors. And the most important thing to notice about that answer is that it doesn't say anything about lagging motivation. And one of the most important shifts that we can help caregivers come to when they are thinking about and working with kids with concerning behaviors is we need to help them get new lenses on. Concerning behavior is not about lagging motivation, it is about lagging skills. The answer to question number 2, when do kids exhibit concerning behaviors, is, well, you already know, when they're having difficulty meeting certain expectations. Kids who exhibit concerning behaviors aren't exhibiting concerning behaviors every second of every waking hour. They are exhibiting concerning behaviors only in certain conditions. What are those conditions? When there are expectations being placed upon them that they're having difficulty meeting. Thank goodness. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems helps us answer the question, why? Why is this kid exhibiting concerning behaviors? Lagging skills. Thank goodness the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems is going to help us answer the question, when? When do kids exhibit concerning behaviors? When there are expectations they're having difficulty meeting, when there is an unsolved problem. That's the information that's been missing. We've known about this kid's signals, this kid's behaviors for a very long time. We don't need to spend any more time talking about the kid's behaviors. Pretty good chance we know what the kid's diagnoses are as well. Don't need to spend any more time talking about that. Pretty good chance we adults have lots of theories about how this kid got to be this way. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Lagging skills are how this kid got to be this way, and unsolved problems tell us when he's gonna exhibit concerning behaviors. Once you know a kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems, that kid's concerning behaviors are highly predictable, and intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. As I say to the parents and teachers and other caregivers that I work with, I'm going to get you out of the heat of the moment. Heat of the moment's bad timing for accomplishing much of anything. As illustrated by this graphic, one of the things Lives in the Balance, the nonprofit that I founded, is very attuned to these days and working against is the use of restraint and seclusion. And this graphic helps explain why. This is the sequence of restraint and seclusion. It's also the sequence of all punitive exclusionary interventions. But for now, this is the sequence of restraint and seclusion. The colors of the bubbles are actually meaningful. Everything in blue is early. Everything in red is late. Blue is crisis prevention, true crisis prevention. Red is crisis management. You don't want to be late. You want to be early. So what's early? Figuring out what expectations a kid is having difficulty meeting and solving those problems proactively so that us caregivers never find ourselves in the red. And if that's what was going on in most places with kids with concerning behaviors, we would almost never find ourselves in the red. But that is not what is mostly going on. What is the prototypical adult response to a kid who's having difficulty meeting a particular expectation? Red bubble number 1, push harder. Insist harder. Founded on the belief that insisting harder will elicit better performance. That's never been my experience. It's not been my experience. And by the way, we all want to get maximum performance out of every kid. That part's fine. It's just that pushing kids harder to meet expectations we already know they cannot reliably meet, in my experience, does not elicit better performance. What does it elicit? Red bubble number 2, behavior. Concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors that tell us what we already knew. This kid is having difficulty reliably meeting this expectation. I want you to notice something very important here. The behavior is late. Behavior is late. Interventions that are primarily focused on behavior are interventions that are focused primarily on what's late. If the behaviors are of a certain type, the unlucky type, what's going to happen next? Well, we adults are going to say that the kid is becoming escalated. And red bubble number 3, what are we going to do next? What we were trained to do in our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training, we're going to try to de-escalate the kid. How is that not crisis prevention? Well, now you're very late. Anything that's very late is not crisis prevention. It's crisis management. If your de-escalation strategies fail you, and because you are now in the heat of the moment, there's a good chance that de-escalation strategies aren't going to get the job done. What do you do next? The next thing that a lot of us were trained to do in our crisis prevention, but really crisis management training, restrain or seclude the kid. And now you are very, very late. Founded on the belief, by the way, that restraint and seclusion keeps kids safer, and the rest of us as well, except that that has never been my experience. And I am aware of no data telling us that restraint and seclusion keep us or the kids safer. In fact, in my experience, it's restraint and seclusion that causes kids and caregivers to get hurt. You don't want to be late. You want to be early. What helps you be early? The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems makes almost the entire enterprise proactive. Whenever people come to me and tell me that they were intervening in the heat of the moment, my usual first statement is, that sounds awful. My usual first question is, have y'all completed the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems for that kid yet? Because if you haven't, then he's still surprising you, because we still don't have the information that's been missing. I'm going to show you a graphic of the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems in a few minutes, but please know that it's available for free on the Lives in the Balance website. And the last slide will show you the web address of the Lives in the Balance website. Big shifts number 4 and 5 are on this slide, and then we will get a little bit more technical. Big shift number 4 is the theme of the entire model, the mentality of the entire model. Kids do well if they can. This is the belief that if this kid could do well, this kid would do well. And if this kid isn't doing well, something must be getting in the kid's way. What's getting in the kid's way? Now you know. The information that's been missing: lagging skills, unsolved problems. By the way, it's not just kids who do well if they can. Parents do well if they can. Classroom teachers do well if they can. Administrators, we all do well if we can. The problem is that for a very long time, that's not what we've been thinking. We've been thinking, that's because for a very long time, we didn't have the research that's accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years on kids with concerning behaviors. We have it now. But what have we been thinking, and in many places still do? Kids do well if they wanna. And it's kids do well if they wanna that causes us to say things, that causes us to characterize kids with concerning behaviors erroneously as attention-seeking, manipulative, coercive, unmotivated, limit testing, lazy, willful, etc. There's characterizations that you are not using in the CPS model. In the CPS model, you are viewing the kid through the prism of lagging skills and unsolved problems. Big shift number 5, and yes, I could spend 15 more minutes just on that big shift, but we don't have time for me to do that. Doing well is preferable. For me, that is a statement of the obvious. Of course, doing well is preferable. A preference for doing well is why most of us do well most of the time. We prefer it. So do kids with concerning behaviors. The difference between a well-behaved kid and a kid with concerning behaviors is not that the well-behaved kid prefers doing well and the kid with concerning behaviors doesn't. That is inaccurate. It's that the kid who's behaving well has skills that the kid with concerning behaviors doesn't. There is zero research, and I mean not one study, telling us that kids with concerning behaviors prefer doing poorly. That study does not exist. What is there now? A mountain of research telling us The reason this kid is responding so poorly to life's problems and frustrations is because the kid is lacking the skills to respond more adaptively to life's problems and frustrations. What skills? We're not going to spend much time on this slide either, but here are the categories of skills. The research tells us kids with concerning behaviors are frequently lacking. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to kids on the externalizing end of the spectrum, or what I refer to as unlucky. These skills are frequently found lacking in kids on the internalizing end of the spectrum, or what I call lucky. A signal is a signal is a signal. Executive skills, language processing, communication skills, emotion regulation skills, cognitive flexibility skills, social skills. I'm not going to spend any more time on these categories because once I show you the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, which is only in a slide or two, you're going to come face to face with some very specific skills, not categories of skills. The reason I'm not deeply invested in these categories is because they're fake. There is so much overlap among these 5 categories that it is truly artificial to pretend that they're discrete entities, even though many of us were taught that they are discrete entities. They're not. Tremendous overlap. And anyways, as it relates to answering the question, why is this kid responding so poorly to life's problems and frustrations? I'd rather have specific skills rather than categories of skills anyways. Yes, I think the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems should be the standard triage pre-referral instrument in every school, everywhere. Would save us a lot of time. It would save us time on testing. It might even save us a full-blown functional behavior assessment. Now, if you work in a school board where you have to do a functional behavior assessment, I should let you know that there is a CPS-flavored functional behavior assessment on the Lives in the Balance website. What I've always said about functional behavior assessments is that once you have a completed assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, it's going to write your FBA for you. Going to write your IEP for you too. I don't even think you guys call them in Canada EEPs, although I might be wrong about that. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the acronym, whatever it's called. One of those is on the Lives in the Balance website as well, a Canadian education plan and an American education plan informed by the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. So now, what are the 2 most important roles that a potential helper can play in the life of a kid who's struggling? Once again, whether that kid is communicating that they are struggling in ways that are lucky or unlucky, your roles are the same. Role number 1, figure out what that kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems are. Once you do, once again, this kid's highly predictable. Intervention can be proactive rather than reactive. You are no longer in perpetual survival mode. You are no longer walking on eggshells. Role number 2, start solving those problems, but do it collaboratively and proactively. Because if you solve problems with kids collaboratively and proactively, a few really good things happen. I'm not being exhaustive here. Good thing number 1, you and the kid are now partners, teammates. This is not adversarial. This is not enemies. It never needed to be. When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you are engaging kids in solving the problems that affect their lives. I'm always asking the question, why would you want to leave the kid out of the loop on that? When you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you and the kid are together coming up with solutions that are a whole lot more effective and a whole lot more durable because you're not flying solo. And when you are solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you are simultaneously enhancing the very skills that the kid is lacking just by engaging the kid in the process of solving problems collaboratively and proactively. So when you're solving problems collaboratively and proactively, you're not just solving problems. You're not just reducing or eliminating the concerning behaviors that are associated with those problems. You are also enhancing the skills the kid was lacking. Here it is. The assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, 2020 version. Those of you who are familiar with this model already, this is a change. We changed it in late 2020 to make it easier and less confusing and faster to use. Whether you're familiar with it or not, lagging skills are at the top. Not an exhaustive list of lagging skills, a representative list of lagging skills. If I had tried to be exhaustive about all the skills the research tells us kids with concerning behaviors could be lacking, the LSIP would be 8 to 10 pages long. You don't need 8 to 10 pages of lagging skills to get the right lenses on, to move from lagging motivation to lagging skills. 18 will do the trick. In the bottom is where, and by the way, the LSIP is available in an editable, fillable format on the Lives in the Balance website so that you can type instead of write and save and share electronically. In the bottom, you are identifying all of the expectations this kid is having difficulty reliably meeting using the prompts that are there in the unsolved problems section. Now, in the earlier rendition of the LSIP, the lagging skills were being used as the prompts to help people think of unsolved problems. Now, we found that to be very confusing for many people, and we found that it made the process take a lot longer than it needed to. Lagging skills now stand alone. There are new prompts for identifying unsolved problems. How long should it take to complete the LSIP? 30 to 45 minutes. Quite frankly, it depends on how many unsolved problems the kid has. The lagging skills section should take 3 to 5 minutes to complete. The unsolved problem section, 30, 35 minutes to complete. Once you've completed the LSIP, you got the information that's been missing. This kid is highly predictable. Intervention can be almost exclusively proactive. Now, also on the Lives in the Balance website, in the walking tour for parents and the walking tour for educators, you will find a video explaining how to use the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems. I think it's hard to figure out how to use it. Even though it looks self-explanatory, I would recommend watching the video before you try to use it. It'll help a lot. What do we hope happens in an LSIP meeting? We hope light bulbs go on. We hope people say, wow, as in, wow, this kid really is lacking a lot of skills. Now that is a beautiful wow moment, especially when it is uttered from the lips of someone who wasn't thinking that when they walked into the meeting. Wow, no wonder what we've been doing hadn't been working. That is a beautiful wow moment, especially when it is uttered from the lips of someone who came into the meeting thinking we should just keep doing what hadn't been working for the last 3 years. This next one often comes with a rather shaken up look attached. Wow, I'm kind of feeling bad about how we've been treating him. What's that person all shook up about? Well, they are now simultaneously reflecting on what they now know about the kid and what they've been doing to him. And they are coming to the recognition that those two do not square up. More wow moments. So you're saying he only gets upset when these unsolved problems pop up? That's right. And you're saying these unsolved problems don't pop up. We know they're coming. Well, that's right, any unsolved problem. You've written in on the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems is by definition predictable, or you wouldn't have been able to write it in. And you're saying that if we solve these problems with him, he won't get upset over them anymore? That's right. Wow. Now, once you identify all of those unsolved problems, you will have to prioritize. In kids who've been exhibiting concerning behaviors for a very long time, there's a very good chance that kid's going to have 30, 40, 50 different unsolved problems. You cannot work on all of them at once. In fact, we never recommend that, we recommend that people never work on more than 2 or 3 unsolved problems at a time. Which 2 or 3? Here's the algorithm. Any unsolved problems that are setting in motion safety issues, high priority, safety first. If we don't have safety issues, we're either going with frequency, the unsolved problems that are setting in motion concerning behaviors most often, or gravity, the unsolved problems that are having the greatest negative impact on this kid's life or the lives of others. You get to pick 3, and those 3 high priority unsolved problems end up on the second sheet of the model, the problem solving plan, also available on the Lives in the Balance website in an editable, fillable format. This is what helps you keep track of what you're working on and where you are in the process of solving a problem with a kid. Once a problem is solved, it comes off of the problem solving plan and another one arrives from the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems to take its place. This is how we're keeping track. This is how we're keeping it organized. As I always say, this is how we're keeping kids and problems from slipping through the cracks. And now there's only one thing left to talk about. Yep, I did include that slide. How we're going to solve those problems. In this model, you have 3 options, but you're only really using 2 of them. Plan A is only up there because it's still very popular. It's a reference point. But in this model, you are seldom using Plan A. The plans that you are using in this model are Plan B and Plan C. Plan C is where you are setting a particular unsolved problem aside, at least for now, not forever. Plan C is what you're doing with the unsolved problems that you have consciously, deliberately, and proactively decided, we're not working on that one right now. We got bigger fish to fry. Plan B is how you're solving problems in this model. And as you already know, in this model, you're doing that collaboratively. What is still way too popular in terms of how caregivers deal with kids with concerning behaviors is Plan A. That's where caregivers are solving the problem unilaterally. Now, we're not allergic to Plan A in this model. If a kid is about to dart in front of a speeding car in a parking lot, you're not doing Plan C. You're not saying, you know what, we've got bigger fish to... You're not doing Plan B, you're too late. You're doing Plan A. You yank on the kid's arm, you save the kid's life. If the kid blows up, so be it. But if 3 weeks later, the kid has now darted in front of a speeding car in a parking lot 17 additional times, and you've yanked 17 additional times. Well, yeah, Plan A is working at saving the kid's life, but Plan A is not working at solving this problem. You're going to need a different plan. The problem is not that we adults occasionally use Plan A. The problem is that we use it a lot, and we stick with it, even though it's clearly not working. How do you solve a problem collaboratively? And this will be the last slide I cover before questions. So if you have questions, get them in there. Yep, I'm right. There are 3 steps that are involved in solving a problem collaboratively. And if you want to see video of this process, Just go to the walking tours on the Lives in the Balance website, and you can see these 3 steps in action. The empathy step is step number 1. That's where you are gathering information from the child about what's hard about meeting a particular expectation. You are not talking with kids about their behaviors in this model. You are talking with these kids about what's hard about meeting the expectations that are causing those behaviors in this model. As I always say about the empathy step, kids have information we badly need. Information about what's hard, information about what's getting in the way. If we do not get that information, this problem will remain unsolved. You need info. The empathy step is where you get it. Some of you are now wondering, what if the kid is a reluctant talker? What if the kid is nonverbal? There are a whole host of strategies that you can find on the Lives in the Balance website for how we gather information, even from kids who are reluctant talkers or who can't communicate through the spoken word. I'm always telling people, don't sell those nonverbal kids short. Don't sell those 3-year-olds short either. The define it all concerns step is where the adult is entering his or her concerns into consideration on the same unsolved problem. We adults have very important concerns as well, regrettably. We often try to get them addressed through use of plan A. Now you're getting that exact same concern addressed through use of plan B. Same concern, completely different approach to getting it addressed. Finally, the invitation. This is where kid and caregiver are collaborating on a solution. But a solution that must meet 2 criteria. Got to be realistic, got to be mutually satisfactory. Realistic meaning both parties can actually do what they're agreeing to do. Mutually satisfactory meaning the solution truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what I've been saying a lot lately, and world history bears me out on it. If this solution is not realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you, this problem is still unsolved. Now, very quickly, even though we're a little short of time, let me give you an example of what this sounds like. Here's my quickest example. I was doing a podcast with a father about a year and a half ago, and he was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter. And the unsolved problem was that she was having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. Now, as it relates to the empathy step, he didn't do the empathy step first. He thought he already knew what was making it hard for her to meet that expectation. He thought it was the taste of the toothpaste. So he was telling me 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste later, she was still having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. So finally, he did the empathy step. I could save you some time here. Start with the empathy step. And what did he learn? When he was brushing her teeth with the electric toothbrush, she was getting water all over her face, and she didn't like that very much. As I said to him, now there's a concern 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste would never conceivably address. What was his concerns? He didn't want her to get cavities because it hurts to get cavities filled, and he didn't really want to spend money on the dentist unnecessarily. The invitation sounds like this. I wonder if there's a way for us to do something about the water getting all over your face when I'm brushing your teeth with the electric toothbrush, and still make sure you don't get cavities, which hurt to get filled and cost me money I don't want to spend. You're then giving the kid the first crack at the solution. You got any ideas? She did, 3 years old. She recommended that they wrap a towel around her face when the father was using the electric toothbrush to brush her teeth before going to bed at night. Who won? Both. They both got their concerns addressed. Who lost? Nobody. Was the father still an authority figure? Very much so. Were the inmates now running the asylum? Absolutely not. There are 3 websites to help you out along, there are 4 websites to help you out along the way. The one that you want to head to first is the Lives in the Balance website. That's where all of the resources I've been referring to so far are based, along with a whole bunch of others. Everything's free on that website. TrueCrisisPrevention.org is our newest website. If you work in a school or facility that wants to dramatically reduce and ultimately eliminate your use of restraint and seclusion, that website's completely free as well. And if you're not familiar with the award-winning documentary film produced by Lives in the Balance, The Kids We Lose, head for thekidswelose.com. You can learn more about it there. Just a little later than I had hoped, but Dr. Meter, I'm ready for questions.
Thanks, Ross, for such an inspiring message. I always get so inspired by really the simplicity of what, I mean, it just makes common sense what you're talking about when you talk about collaborative solving problems. Let me just ask the top question that kind of got upvoted the most with Natalia's question. How do we, I mean, if this makes so much sense, why do we still resort to plan A all the time? I mean, it seems quick. It seems like, well, adults should know better. So why don't we just get right to what the solution is going to be anyways? So why waste time collaboratively solving problems?
Well,
why are we still in that mindset?
Not everybody is aware of that mindset, and not everybody is aware of alternative ways to help kids. Not everybody is aware that we shouldn't be focused on behavior and should instead be focused on unsolved problems. Boy, I got to tell you, I'm spending every waking hour getting this information out there, giving as much of it away for free as I possibly can. There's books, there's workshops, there's the Lives in the Balance website, there's more in the pipeline. Quite frankly, I don't exactly know the answer to that question because the research on lagging skills has been around for 40 to 50 years, and it simply continues to grow over time. I wish I had a good answer to that question. I think we still have some old, whenever we ask staff in schools and facilities and parents, why are you still doing what you're telling us isn't working? The number one response is, it's the way we've always done it. And that might be your best answer.
Yeah, I suspect that many parents who are practicing Plan A grew up with Plan A, and that's all we know. So this is a great way of introducing us to a new way of really addressing behavior, which is, of course, the tip of the iceberg, as you've explained already. One more question. A couple of people asked about the people that aren't communicating. So it's collaborative. So we expect the child to want to communicate. You alluded a little bit to, there are some tips on the website, but maybe share 1 or 2 things like the teenager that sits there and shrugs, not interested, nothing coming from me today, nice try.
Well, you know, there's no doubt that that can be challenging, so I don't want to dismiss that. Frequently, I find that that is a kid with a long history of adults throwing Plan A at the kid. So the bottom line is, my goal is, sometimes kids won't answer your question about what you're asking, but they will answer why it is that they don't want to talk to you. And I'm completely open to why a kid might not want to talk to me. I come across that a lot, and it's extraordinarily rare. Once we're helping the kid know that we're meeting him where he's at, once we get past some initial resistance, once the kid starts to become clear that this is a completely different playing field and we are not about to lower the boom, I find that kids do talk. But as it relates to a strategy, my favorite, teaching the kid 5 fingers. 5 means very true, 4 means pretty true, 3 means sort of true, 2 means not very true, 1 means not true at all. Then what I do is I make statements. All the kids got to do is hold up finger to let me know how true that statement is. So in the case of, and I know that this is a seemingly benign one, except that it causes concerning behaviors throughout North America millions of times every night. Let's go with the teeth brushing. Here's what my guess would be. You don't like the taste of the toothpaste. Now, if we had started there, if the father had started there, the kid would have done this. You don't like the way the toothbrush feels on your teeth and gums. You don't like that it gets water all over your face. Good, we've got our answer. Let's keep going.
Mhm. Thanks. I'm sure there's many questions we didn't get to, and I apologize for that, but excellent talk. Thank you so much on behalf of Waypoint Research Institute for joining us today for this really enlightening look at the CPS model. A number of the websites are on the chat. Feel free to connect with those. They're actually on the slide here in front of us. And we will be sending out a follow-up email to all attendees as well. So once again, on behalf of Waypoint, thank you, Dr. Greene, for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing more about CPS in the future.
Thanks very much for inviting me to do this.